you, Brooklyn. Now I want to adjust this so I can move around a little bit. Okay, before I start, does anyone know Adrian, who loaned me this book last year? No? Okay, I'll have to track him down somewhere else. He came because of the Krellin talk, I know that, so he lives next door to one of the Krellin houses, but I can't remember which one, and I took his phone number and forgot to hit save. Anyway, tonight I'm going to talk about one of my relatives. He's my great-grandfather's half-brother, and I'll get into a little bit of the family history and a lot about the man and what he did. And the vehicle on the first slide is one of the cars that he developed, and it's a 1908 Russell L. And this came from a stamp that was created because it's one of the historic vehicles of Ontario. So, has anybody ever owned a pair of CCM skates? Put your hand up. Bicycle, gotta have a CCM bicycle? Well, yes, there's a big connection here. And this is the card that the Canada Post put out to advertise the historic vehicles series of stamps. I had never really heard of Tommy Russell. My mom knew of him. She knew him. They grew up not that far. I mean, he was much older than her, but you know, in family stories, as a kid, you don't really absorb who's who, you know, unless you know exactly. And there were probably stories, but I don't ever remember hearing one about any of the relatives who designed a car, that's for sure. So my interest came from my mom asking me to get one of these stamps for her. She had the card. She had already written to Canada Post and got a lovely letter back from someone who said, "No, Mrs. Bossenberry, you cannot order just one stamp. You have to buy the whole series." But alas, the lady that wrote the letter never mentioned how she would get one of those stamps. And of course, by the time she asked me, a few years had gone by, and I didn't twig that I probably could have asked somebody from the stamp club. Now I have some of the stamps because I have stamp club connections now. Thank you, Starla. So this was early in my genealogy career, like way back in the 1990s. My first Canadian branch of this family, James Russell, was born in Scotland in Ryden, which is near Airdrie in Lanarkshire. Born in 1819, came to Canada and died in 1897. This would be easier if I could do that. He married Janet Cook. He married Janet Cook in Scotland. She was born in 1822. They got married in 1843. And, oops, there we go. They had 4 sons. James, the oldest son, James, named for his dad, became a doctor. He was the head alienist, or the head psychiatrist in those days at the Hamilton Lunatic Asylum. We're not allowed to call it that anymore, but that's what it was called officially in the 1800s. They had a son, Henry, who died fairly young, a son, David, who became a blacksmith in the Exeter area, and William, my great-grandfather. William was born in 1850, and alas, his mother died when he was just over a year old. In the, I'll go on to the second wife. Agnes Lamb was the second wife. She and James married in June 17th, 1851, which wasn't really that long after Janet had died. Agnes was, and I'll show you the census record in a minute. Agnes was a housekeeper in the 1851 census for Scotland, and she had 3 sons: Thomas Lamb Russell, who's Tommy Alexander Russell's father; John Russell, who ended up in California and just kind of disappeared off the face of the earth, for genealogical purposes anyway. John Russell apparently is a very common name. And Gavin, who didn't live to a ripe old age, unfortunately. So in the 1851 census for Scotland, there's James, who was 28 years old, and the 4 sons, and Agnes Lamb, who was a servant, and she was 20 years old. And this was in Carstairs, which was a major railway junction in Scotland. James was an engine driver for the one of the railroads. So James and family up and moved to Hay Township in Huron County, right outside of Exeter. And this is just a little corner map of, I don't have a pointer, but Exeter is kind of in the middle, and maybe I could do, no, I can't do it with my mouse. And there's a little bit of a close-up where you can see Exeter. Francistown is the north end of Exeter at the junction of Highway 82 and Highway 4. And the farm that James bought was Lot 4, Concession 2, Hay Township, so just down the road from the Exeter Cemetery, heading north. Very easy to find, so it's on both maps there. In the 1861 census, they were living in a log house, which was built in 1858. They actually purchased the property in 1856, so had a couple of years to get established. Now, one would ask, why would an engine driver for a major railway in Scotland just pick up and head to Canada? Good question. One of my cousins said to me one time, and I'd never heard this from my mother, but she said her mother, who was older than my mother and a school teacher, so she knew a lot of stuff, she said that there was some kind of an accident or whatever, that had something to do with the cow catcher on the train. And I don't know if you remember those things, but they were the big metal things at the front of the engine, which would, I guess, clear everything out of the path. I searched and searched and searched. I've been to Scotland researching 3 times, and I still have not found anything. There are many train accidents in the 1850s and on. I mean, they had absolutely no safety measures, but I have not been able to find anything where James was mentioned as participant in any kind of an incident. So we're just going to say they arrived in Canada. And like a lot of families, I don't know how they got here. I mean, they would have taken a ship, but unless somebody wrote it down in family memoirs, none of us would know really how our people got here, because ships lists are hard to find before 1865. Anyway, so there's the family in 1861 in Hay Township: James, Agnes, David, William, Thomas, John, and Gavin, the whole family. And Gavin is the only one that was born in Canada. Agnes was pregnant for him when the first John was born in Scotland, but I think she was pregnant for Gavin by the time they got to Canada. And this is a later map showing, from one of the historical atlases, I think this is the 1879 Huron County Atlas, where William is the resident. That's Lot 4, Concession 2, Hay Township, and on the other map is James Russell on the right. That is Highway 81 heading east, I guess, north or through Exeter. And he bought that property in 1869, which, you know, why would, like, he must have had some kind of money, because he paid for the land and got his deed right away for the Hay Township land, and he paid for this one. Right across the road was a widow and her, she had a whole crowd of kids. The husband, the name was Dougal, and the husband had been gored by a bull in 1856. So this lady was running the farm with her sons, and her young daughter ended up marrying Thomas Lamb Russell, the oldest of Agnes's sons. And this, well, I think I showed this picture in the slides last year, this because I really like stone houses, and this was the stone house that James built on the Osborne Township lot that he bought, which is a pretty nice, cute little house. So Thomas Lamb Russell, the oldest of Agnes's son, married Margaret Harvey Foley from across the road, and in December 1875, Thomas Alexander Russell was the oldest son of that marriage, and there were 5 daughters as well, and every one of those daughters married well, I can tell you. And Thomas Lamb Russell made his money. He was a breeder of shorthorn and an importer and breeder of shorthorn cattle, so he was doing quite well for himself. And in the mid-1890s built this house. And what's unique about that, I mean, there are lots of 2-story yellow brick houses around, but there are 3 2-story bays, which the owners of the property now invited me to have a tour of the house a number of years ago, and they had restored the inside. I mean, they didn't destroy any of the original woodwork or anything, and the baseboards must have been 18 inches high. And the wife had been trying to find any other houses or trying to find who actually built this house. And all that I could find out for her was a little article that was in the Exeter paper that said the house was built, or that it said Thomas Lamb Russell had erected a new house on his property on North Thames Line. North Thames Road. So, about our Thomas Alexander Russell. By all accounts, he was a bright young man, born in 1877 in Osborne Township. He attended SS number 5 Osborne School and went to high school in St. Mary's. So he would have boarded there and probably came home on weekends if. He was a bright kid. He ended up winning a scholarship to the University of Toronto, and he graduated at the top of his class in all his schooling, in public school, high school, and at university. And when he was at high school in St. Mary's, he won a scholarship to attend the University of Toronto and enrolled in 1895. And one of the things about him, I mean, the first time he was ever on a train or outside of that area was taking cattle to different shows that his father was showing his shorthorn cattle at various fairs, and presumably I don't know if when did the Royal start? It was probably well established by then, but all I found out was that he had just gone to various exhibitions for his cattle. At University of Toronto, he studied political science, getting a Bachelor of Arts, as well as being involved in many university activities. The Intercollegiate Debating Union, Director of Finances of the Classical Association, Secretary-Treasurer of the Athletic Association and the Athletic Board, and he played rugby. he was a wing. I don't know. I'm not that familiar with rugby. The wing must be, you know, an essential player, of course. Once again, he graduated at the top of his class, winning the Canadian Bankers Association Scholarship and the Alexander Mackenzie Fellowship. After he graduated, the university appointed him as a lecturer in the political science department for a year, where he taught other students. And probably like many young people graduating from university, years of intensive study, he may have decided it was time to earn a little bit of money, so started looking around for employment. And he saw an advertisement for the position of Executive Secretary of the Canadian Manufacturers Association to run its central office. And much to his surprise, he was selected. Oh, there, I have a few slides of his university days. So there he is in the middle, a very nice looking man, and there's really such a resemblance. My grandfather looked very much like him. So this is from the debating union in the last year he was at university, and there's his athletic association group. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Canadian Manufacturers Association. Had a membership of only 132 organizations, paying about $10 in annual dues. And after he was hired, and after about 18 months of him being involved with the association, he boosted the membership to 900, and he also established a magazine called Industrial Canada. Ignore that slide for a minute. So the Canadian Manufacturers Association, well, we'll get on to the bicycle making. So the history of the bicycle in Canada, just a quickie. I got all my information from this book, John A. McEntee, Canadian Cycle and Motor. It's an interesting little read. In 1878, John Moody from Hamilton imported a high-wheeler bicycle. Remember the penny farthings. And long before long, bicycle schools and groups sprang up across Canada, and a number of manufacturers started producing bicycles. Making bicycles safer and more stable by lowering the center of gravity and incorporating the pneumatic tire invented by J.B. Dunlop in 1888. And several American companies opened Canadian branch plants to assemble Canadian-made bicycles, quote unquote. By the mid-1890s, the bicycle industry was booming, and stores sold bicycles and accessories, and the blacksmiths who repaired them helped to service the growing demand for bicycles. And actually, Tommy Russell rode a bicycle around Toronto when he was at university. In 1896, Walter Massey had added bicycles to the Massey-Harris farm equipment business, viewing the American companies as a threat to his own company, but also that of Canada as well. And based on the success of his company, Massey argued in order to stand against foreign competition that the Canadian bicycle manufacturers needed to consolidate into one large company, and thus the CCM, or Canadian Cycle and Motor Company, was born in 1899. With the merger of 5 of the largest bicycle manufacturers, with the headquarters at the corner of Bay and Front Streets in Toronto. So the companies were Massey-Harris, Gold Bicycle Company, H.A. Lozer and Company, Cleveland, Brantford, Gendron, and Welland Vale. They were the biggest manufacturers. CCM had its difficulties. Walter Massey was the first president, of course. And financial and declining markets were part of the problem for the problem with the bicycle industry. Walter Massey died in 1901, just as the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. And Tommy Russell, as the executive secretary of the Canadian Manufacturers Association, was well known to the directors of CCM and was approached to help turn the company around. And it is said, once he set his hand to anything, he never gave up. Russell had a no-nonsense outlook to business and life and had the complete support of the board of directors as the new general manager. So in 1902, he became the general manager of CCM, and he was only 24. Cycle sales were beginning to decline, of course, and once he got his hands on the business, things were starting to look a little bit better. But these are some of the early bicycle ads, and really the general look of bicycles hasn't changed all that much in 100 and some odd years. But they're cycling far easier than walking, and it's quite an interesting little write-up about why you should own a bicycle and not walk. Save your strength. So Russell managed to turn the company around with the consolidation of the many bicycle manufacturing plants to the main junction at Toronto Junction and Weston Road, and that's in current Weston. He downsized retail operations, closed other plants, reduced staff, restructured the finances of the company, and decided it was they needed to do something for the colder weather activities. So he put his focus on skates. This is a slide of the plant at Toronto Junction, and that's a little bit better photo. Huge. They had, I jotted it down, 10 acres of land and employed 600 people. So it was pretty major. So this is a picture of Tommy Russell that was in the Industrial Canada magazine that he got going. Nice looking young man. So he really became involved in the business when he was I think the kind of guy that had to do things. And one of the things that he did was develop the skate blade that you could hook onto a boot. And he applied for a patent in Canada and then in the US. And this is, you can see his signature down at the bottom. This is what the skate blade that would attach to the boot looked like. He ended up connecting with a shoemaker from Brandon, Manitoba called Tuckaberry. And Mr. Tuckaberry developed the boot that they could attach the blade to, and that turned out to be fairly successful. There's a picture, and I mean, that particular style of skate has been around forever, and I mean, I don't think it's been all that long. The newer skates are more man-made. A boot, and the blades look a little bit different, but the tube skate looked pretty much like that. And I just want to read you a letter. This is a letter to CCM from the Boston Professional Hockey Association, Art H. Ross, manager. And it was written from Montreal, December 28, 1924. Testimonials, as a general rule, do not come voluntarily, but as our team was equipped with the tube skate of another make, and as every single pair showed defects, you can readily understand that we were greatly put out. Since our team was equipped with your skates, we have not had a single complaint. Our sharpening bill has been reduced 75%, and I do not hesitate one moment in saying that the result of the change has helped our team in no small degree. I certainly believe you have the finest hockey skate manufactured today, and you are quite at liberty to quote me saying so. So, I mean, that was a pretty good endorsement. And I don't know if that Boston Professional Hockey Association became the Boston, yeah, who knows. This was Tommy Russell's philosophy. Everything was a shared responsibility. To give the public a good article at a fair price, and to give the working man and woman the fullest share possible of the return which they helped to produce. And apparently he was very well respected by all the employees at the CCM plants. I know whether he got involved, went around and talked to them, I'm not exactly sure, but many of them turned up at his funeral. So he wasn't one to sort of sit around. He started to become very interested in motorized vehicles, including motorcycles. He purchased several car manufacturing plants and started to produce lightweight 3- and 4-wheeled vehicles. Oh, I'm just going to skip this one for a minute and show you one of the ads for world-winning wheels. And down in the right-hand corner, you can see one of the little putt-putts that they were driving around in. So at this point, we're going to take a quick look at major developments in transportation around the world. In 1886, the Canadian Pacific Railway was completed across Canada. In 1888, J.B. Dunlop invented the pneumatic tire. In 1892, Diesel patented the internal combustion engine. In 1893, Benz constructed a 4-wheeled car. In 1893, Henry Ford built his first car. In 1898, the Paris Metro opened. And in 1899, of course, CCM was established. In 1901 were the first motor-driven bicycles, so the first motorcycles. In 1901, the first Mercedes car was constructed. In 1901, also J.P. Morgan established U.S. Steel. And in 1902, there were the first taxi cabs in London, England. In 1903, the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit was established in England. In 1903, Henry Ford funds the Ford Motor Company for $100,000. And in 1903, there was a coast-to-coast crossing of the U.S. by car, which is pretty amazing because I don't think there were very many paved roads in those days. 1904, the Rolls-Royce Company was founded. In 1905, the first motor buses were established in London. In 1908, General Motors Corporation was founded. And in 1908 was the first Model T, the Ford Model T. And in 1910, I think this was the start of the Daytona 500 or something, Barney Oldfield drives a Benz at 133 miles per hour at Daytona Beach, and I think that's really amazing for 1910, when the speed limit was 20 miles an hour. And in 1913, Henry Ford advertised his new assembly line techniques, and I think that was, I mean, we're all probably familiar with a little bit of Henry Ford's history, that the assembly line cut down on costs and that kind of a thing. However, back to here's Tommy Russell driving around in a little Ivanhoe electric car in 1903. I'm not sure you could fit 2 people in that. And there wasn't a steering wheel, it was kind of like a stick. And I don't think it went very fast.
Didn't worry about the 20 miles per hour, right?
Yeah, I don't think that one would go 20 miles an hour. One of the first Russell cars that was built actually was purchased by a chap who lives in the Exeter area, Harold Cudmore, and he owned, well, he's not around anymore, but his family still has the 2 Russell cars. One, my cousin Bill, who lives on the family farm in Hay Township, he has been to the barn where these cars are squirreled away, and you know, nobody gets to see them, which is too bad because they are rare. Actually, it was probably 10 or 12 years ago, Ontario Genealogical Society had a conference in Oshawa, and they had tours of various areas around Oshawa, and I signed up for the one of the Automotive Museum in Oshawa, and the first thing I asked when I got there, and I said, "Oh, have you got a Russell car?" Never heard of it. You don't know what you're missing, buddy. Anyway, so this was a 1906 Russell, and from the little Ivanhoe that Tommy Russell was driving, it's kind of a, you know, snazzy looking car. But notice that the steering wheel is on the right. Yeah.
How come?
I don't know. Now, like anything I've read, nobody even mentioned where the steering wheel was, and it wasn't until I started looking at these pictures and went, well, I wonder when they changed it. Probably closer to the First World War, I believe. Here is Tommy Russell with a fleet of Russell Model A cars at Toronto City Hall. And there he is on the far left, and I think he's with one of the Eatons from the Eaton Company. So I think they were going on a little rally. Here's an early Russell ad. Most of the cars were advertised without covering. So I guess convertible, you'd only drive on nice, warm, sunny days. The Model A was a 12 horsepower touring car for only $1,300. I think that would have been a fair chunk of change in those days, because I remember the first car I owned was a Volkswagen Beetle, and I think it cost $1,000. So, I mean, that was a few years later. The Model B was a 16 horsepower touring car for $1,500, and the Model C was a 24 horsepower touring car deluxe for $2,500. So, yeah, they were pretty snazzy looking. I think you would have had to have a little bit of income to be driving one of those. There's another one, a Model B, and that's just with the regular equipment. In 1904, I don't know if you can read, you can see that, but I'll read it out. Mr. and Mrs. T.A. Russell of Toronto were among the arrivals on Friday's Express. Mr. Russell is the general manager of Canada Cycle and Motor Company of Toronto and is out on an inspection trip of the company's branches. After spending a few days in the city, Mr. Russell will leave for San Francisco, whence he will take passage for Australia to make the first inspection of the firm's branches in that continent. Mr. Russell stated that the demand for motor vehicles in the East was double the available supply, while the demand for the company's product from Australia now amounted to more than in Canada. And there are a number of pictures in various books. The CCM had a branch in Canada. They had Australia, England, and New Zealand. So they covered the major part of the British Empire. So they boasted their advertising to promote these fancy cars. So this is from one of the Vancouver papers in 1904. One of the things that Tommy Russell did was have stunts to get press coverage. And this was one where they're driving a 4-cylinder, 25 horsepower Russell, so the deluxe model, across Lake Ontario and racing an ice boat. And believe it or not, the car won by a hair, but it won. So good publicity over that one, but I can't imagine in the kind of weather that to have the ice frozen enough that you could drive a vehicle on it, and here are these guys in a convertible and probably freezing to death with their top hats and stuff. Yeah. The Russell Motor Car Company produced not only cars, but they got into other vehicles as well. This is a photo from the Horseless Age magazine, and it's a Russell two-ton truck carrying a Gazalt lathe weighing 9,000 pounds. And the steering wheel's still on the right. Yeah, no seat belts. Here's another one. This is a 2-ton chain-driven truck. So companies were buying these vehicles to move things around. The horse and carriage was, long gone at this point. And they also did sightseeing buses. This is one called the Cheery Auto Park Tally Ho in Stanley Park in 1908. Would look like a nice outing. This is, of course, a picture of a restored Russell, a Model D, a 1907 model. And I'm not sure where this car is, but there are a few of them around. When I started doing this research, I only knew of Harold Cudmore's and one in the Western Development Museum in Moose Jaw, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second. But this looks like it's in an automotive museum. There's another 1908 Russell Model L with the roof up. And here's Yaroslav Petrushin, and he's the chap who wrote this book, and this is strictly about the Russell cars. It doesn't have very much information about Tommy as a man, a bit, but mostly about the cars, so you can have a look at that after. So he's in front of the 1907 Model L that's in the Western Development Museum in Moose Jaw. And there it is. A friend of mine was traveling to Moose Jaw, and I asked her to take a picture of it. And I mean, it is a snazzy car. I don't think the lime green and the baby blue were the original colors, although the cars were not just basic black. They came in red and green, like a dark green, with matching upholstery. You could get red leather upholstery with black trim. So, yeah. And apparently the brass around the headlights and the horn and that kind of a thing, it had a special coating that it didn't have to be polished too often. Here's John C. Eaton in a Russell runabout around 1908, and I think is that the Ontario legislature in the background? I'm not sure. Pretty fancy. Here's a Russell car display at the CNE in 1908 as well. By 1909, CCM and the makers of the Russell car had become the largest automobile manufacturers in Canada. The Ford, Tin Lizzie, and McLaughlin Buick were their chief competitors. And Russell decided to focus on the high-end, upper end of the market with a low production luxury vehicle. So not so many higher price, fancier, for all his rich friends. And that's when they came up with the motto, made up to a standard, not down to a price. And that's another ad. This one is, it's the Russell Knight. So at somewhere 1910-ish, he connected with the manufacturer of a Knight motor. And I do have something written about that. Anyway, it was a, I guess, revolutionary type motor that wasn't very noisy. So they started putting it in Russell cars. Oh, and there's Harold Cudmore again in his 1911 Russell car. Steering wheel still on the right. But this is a larger model. And this, of course, is a restored one. This one is from someplace in BC. There are about 5 or more Russell cars in BC, and apparently they have a little rally every once in a while. And this is the 1911 Knight Model 38. The Calgary mayor at the time, in 1912, owned a Russell Knight. And here's one, a Russell Knight on a little bit of a muddy street in Toronto. This one was actually stuck. There are other pictures where I got that one that shows some pushing and towing and that kind of a thing. Yeah, but that wouldn't have been fun. But the license plate, they'd already started issuing license plates, and that was number 1014. So there were at least 1,013 other cars in Ontario. And actually, T.C. Eaton owned license plate number 1. He was very proud of that. In 1912, Russell cars were sent to meet the Royal Train in Ottawa. In connection with the arrival in Ottawa tonight of His Royal Highness the Governor General, Mr. H.G. Ketchum, General Manager of the Ottawa Taxi and Auto Company, has been requested to provide 3 Russell motor cars equipped with the Knight motors on arrival of the Royal Train at 5:30 to convey the Royal Party to Rideau Hall, returning to the train for departure at 7:30. So a quick pit stop at to visit the Governor General. And here is the logo for the Russell motor cars that they came up with, made up to a standard, not down to a price. Here's a 1913 Russell 28, so totally enclosed. And here's a Russell 1913 Russell Knight Model 28. And I'm not sure where this one is, but it's obviously in a car exhibit somewhere, and part of the license is covered up, but it's 349 something, so much later. The 1914 Russell 42 Berline 6-cylinder, and this was more like a limousine. And here's a 1914 Russell Knight Model 28. Same car, just a little bit different at the top.
Steering wheels on the other side now.
Oh yes, okay, I knew it was right around then, good eye.
So it's the one in 13.
Was it?
Yes, that was.
I've been looking at these for so long. Yep, you're
Yep.
right.
Right.
By 1914, there were a lot of things going on in the world, and the luxury automobile sales were starting to decline. With the outbreak of World War I, the company had the opportunity to supply motorized equipment for the Canadian Armed Forces. And the Defense Minister, Sir Sam Hughes, appointed Tommy Russell to procure motor vehicles for the Army. The company produced bicycles on the CCM side and staff cars, trucks, and even a bizarre squadron of armored vehicles that could be driven from either end. And one was the Russell Death Machine, and I have a picture of that too. Under the Russell Motor Car Company, of course. The business was also manufacturing munitions for the war effort, and CCM was asked to turn out millions of shells, and Russell was put in charge of making that happen. The era of the wholly Canadian-made car ended in 1915 when John Willies of the Willies Overland Company, Toledo, Ohio, purchased the Russell Motor Car Company with Russell as vice president. Willies needed the rights to the Knight engine so that he could sell his vehicles in Canada. They had to be at least partly made in Canada. and he became president of CCM in 1916. Not much is written about his private life, but, oops, more ads. The Russell 6, 1750. And that's kind of a nice looking one. They built another plant in Weston, and by 1917, 525 employees worked there, and they were making 900 bicycles a week. And we don't really hear much about what happened in World War I, but there were a lot of bicycles that were shipped over, and in fact for World War II as well, CCM produced a lot of bicycles for the war effort. Here's an ambulance that is the Saskatchewan IODE presented to the government for service abroad. So it could hold 4 wounded lying down on stretchers or 10 sitting side by side. And there were several of these in service. And here's the Russell Death Machine. It looks kind of scary. Like a real armored vehicle. I guess the precursor to tanks, maybe.
Yeah.
So Tommy Russell, the citizen. Not much is written about his private life, and he didn't leave a memoir that I've been able to find, and even with some of his direct descendants, nobody has anything more personal. He was the director of the Ontario Motor League and the first secretary and later the president. So the Ontario Motor League is now the it was Ontario Motor League and then now Canadian Automobile Association, CAA. He was a member of the Canadian Club and the National Club in Toronto. He was a trustee of Toronto General Hospital and later the Banting Institute. He was on the U of T Board of Directors for 28 years and a member of the Canadian National Exhibition Board, and he was actually president of the CNE for a couple of years around 1920. He received a Doctor of Laws honoris causa in 1930 from U of T. He was the director of CIBC and a breeder of shorthorn cattle. So there's another picture of a more mature Tommy Russell. He married Olive Lillian Brown in 1903 when he would have been quite a young man. They had 5 children, and unfortunately Margaret, the oldest daughter, and William Lloyd, the youngest son. Margaret died in 1920 of influenza, and I think William Lloyd, I think it was influenza as well. So that, it's very tragic for a young family to lose 2 children like that. John Alexander Russell, born in 1908, and Thomas Brown Russell, born in 1907. Both those sons went on to become part of the CCM, Russell Motor Car Company, and various offshoots became involved in their business. And both of them died within a month of each other of heart problems, like just, in their early 40s. So, I don't know of any other members of the family other than their father who succumbed to heart problems. Olive Lillian Brown was daughter of Captain Thomas Brown, veteran of the Northwest Campaign in 1885, and Jenny Irwin. He was 26, she was 25. In 1911 and 1921, the family lived at 162 Walmer Road. This is a more recent picture in Toronto. And in 1931, they had moved further north to Forest Hills at number 1 Dewborn Avenue, near Eglinton and Bathurst, in that area. It had 9 rooms, this is from the census, it had 9 rooms and was worth $50,000, but they didn't own a radio. And that was one of the key things in the 1931 census that I've made note of, that how many people had radios. It was I guess, a real status symbol. He only earned $50,000 in 1931, according to the census. So, you know, maybe they couldn't afford one, I don't know. He never lost his love of farming and cattle breeding, and in 1910 he bought a 40-acre farm in Downsview and started his own herd and earned the reputation as a breeder of shorthorn cattle like his father. And I couldn't find a picture of the farm. Bray Lodge it was called. And he kept purchasing more and more property around it and ended up with about 650 acres. And he showed his steers at various exhibitions and fairs. And as a member of the board of the CNE, he reorganized the exhibition's cattle classification to a standard that was adopted by all over the country. So I'm not that familiar with showing cattle, but I know it's a big deal especially for the dairy farmers around here. I don't know if there are that many cattle breeders in Ontario County, but I know there are a lot of dairy farmers that never miss the Royal anyway. He was recorded in the 1912 version of Canadian Men and Women of the Time, which gave a brief biography, and Mr. and Mrs. Thomas A. Russell of 162 Walmer Road were recorded in the Blue Book of Toronto, Hamilton, and London, a reliable directory of over 4,000 of the elite families of Toronto, Hamilton, London, and numerous smaller towns. So if you didn't get to the Blue Book, I guess you didn't count. Amid the full force of the Depression, the Bank of Commerce persuaded Russell to assume the presidency of the financially crippled Massey Harris Company. For 10 years, Russell led the company. Through aggressive rebuilding, it regained strength and developed the revolutionary self-propelled combine. Here are some of his business affiliations. So, loving his cattle and showing them all over the place, traveling all over the world for the company and everything else. You wonder how he would have had time for all of these. But he was president of Massey Harris, president of Russell Industries, president of Canadian Acme Screw and Gear Limited, president by this time of Canadian Cycle and Motor Company, and the Galt Machine Screw Limited. He was vice president of Modern Knitting Company Limited, and he was the director of all of these companies: Canadian Bank of Commerce, Canadian National Exhibition, Mutual Life Assurance Company of Canada, Canada Cement Company, Toronto General Trust Corporation, Canadian International Paper Company, Underwood Elliott Fisher Limited, Canadian Airways Limited, and the Arkwright Mutual Life Fire Insurance Company. And in my research, I found all kinds of records of him leaving, coming back to Canada on various ships, and he traveled a lot. He continued as vice president of president of CCM, president of Massey Harris, and vice president of Willys Overland. He conducted business at home and abroad, and in his work he was all over the place, but suffered heart attacks in 1934 and 1938. And while working on the conversion of the plants for the war effort, he succumbed to ill health and passed away on December 29, 1940, of pneumonia. And I mean, just a couple of years before antibiotics were readily available, which is unfortunate. He was buried at Mount Pleasant Cemetery in the mausoleum. This is a nice early picture of him. And Arthur Meehan, who was, I think, Canada's 6th Prime Minister, they were boyhood friends from St. Mary's. And he read an eulogy and said, "Canada has lost one of her most modest and silent, but one of her greatest sons," which was a very nice tribute. The Toronto Star listed all of his holdings, which were multitudinous. His estate was worth over $900,000, and he left the University of Toronto and Toronto General Hospital large bequests in his will, and the widow gets the bulk, and there were a lot of stipulations about who got what and that kind of a thing, as there are in a lot of wills. So that's basically my story about Tommy Russell. And here's a big picture of the stamp. As I said before, it's from the Historic Land Vehicles series. It was issued in 1993. The illustration was by Cameron Wykes, designed by Joseph Galt and Tilmet, who was a Danish designer. But I mean, it's when you think about the artwork and stamps, I mean, next time you see a stamp, take a good look at the engravings. They're exquisite pieces of art, and that's one of the nicest ones I've seen. And there is the series, and it's the far on the left. And there's also, it's not a very good picture, but there was a coin. I don't have one, my cousin Bill has one, but a very nice coin. I think it cost only $52 or something, including tax, when it was issued. Probably not available anymore. And this is just another one with the stamp on an envelope. Now, if you don't know how important the Scots are to Canada, most of you should, being from this area. I don't think this book is available in the Woodstock Library, and I haven't checked the county library to see if it's still available. But it was a fascinating, if a somewhat heavy read, but it kind of explains a lot of why so many Scots were, maybe it was the Protestant ethic or something, the work ethic, because so many Scots did so many things, invented so many things, and are, behind a lot of the things that we do now. So that's a good book. And then I have the book by Yaroslav Petrushin and the one by John McKenty, if you want to come up and have a look at those as well. And that's it for me. Any questions?
Not
Yes.
a question, but a comment.
Okay.
Do you realize that there is a Russell owner in the audience tonight?
There is. Is that you?
No.
Oh.
You go. Stand up.
You own one? Wow. And where is it now?
It's actually, it's actually the oldest Russell known to exist.
Really?
VIN number 57.
Oh, wow. Wow.
It's a Model B Roadster.
Yeah. Do you have a picture of it?
No, but if you're going to the Toronto auto show will be there this year, right in Metro Convention Center.
Oh, good for you. I'm going to advertise that with all my relatives.
You have a relative in Oakville? I met one down there.
There are, like, Tommy's direct descendants.
Yes.
There might be some in Oakville, yeah. Yeah. Part of the, well, actually, there is one at the Science and Technology Museum in Ottawa now that belonged to his youngest daughter, Olive Elizabeth Russell. And she married a fellow named Anderson, and she lived until she was 90-something, and
90, I think I remember, 90,
yeah.
1918, 17, 1907 or something.
Yeah.
1907, I don't know.
Yeah, she was quite elderly, and of course, by the time I got around to doing some of this, like all my research, they've all died. But yeah, and now, and when I started doing the research, I thought there was only like Harold Cudmore's and this one in the Western Development Museum. And when I heard a talk by this fellow, then he was talking about a website, so russellcars.ca. Are you on that?
I know the guy who made it though, he's up in BC.
Yeah, and he listed a bunch of cars that are still around.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, can I get you?
I have a list if you wanna see it.
Yeah,
Not here, but.
yeah, we'll change numbers. I'll try and remember to save it this time.
Are you gonna look at the book through next year?
I'll bring the book next year if I'm invited back. Yeah, that's great. Now, is there any other comments? Yes, sir.
Just one question. You had a slide coming in, one of the affiliations or wording was CIBC.
Yeah,
Is that the bank?
Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. Yeah.
But then Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce didn't join until later in, I think it was the 50s or the 60s. And then another slide said it was the Canadian Bank of Commerce. So would it have been the Canadian Bank of Commerce?
Well, one or the other. I don't know where I got that. Yeah.
I just wondered that because
Well,
Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce was later with Commerce. They came
Bank of-
together. The Imperial Bank of Canada joined with the Canadian Bank
Commerce.
of Commerce.
Okay.
CIBC, but I think it was in the 60s or 70s.
I'll
or
have to
something
look
like
that up. Yeah, one of my friends
If-
worked for
If you go down to
CIBC.
King in London, you go in King and Richmond, southeast corner, there's a building there, and in stone is written Canadian Imperial Bank of Canada.
Ah, so that's probably what he was involved in, Canadian Imperial Bank of
Could have
Canada.
been.
Probably, yeah. Yeah. King and Richmond, look for the plaque.
Well, it's not a plaque,
Or,
it's on the stone,
carved in the stone.
in the stone above it.
Okay, King and Richmond, I'm gonna make a note of that.
Richmond. So,
Yeah.
just-
Anybody else? Yes.
You mentioned it was electric at the first, so when did he switch from electric to gasoline?
Right around, the early 1900s, 4, 5, 6, 8, right in there.
So the
Yeah.
electric didn't last long.
The electric cars didn't last all that long. I don't think they had the horsepower.
So, in the aughts, battery cars and gas cars were the same amount, but oil industry pressure and also battery cars were considered women's cars, because they were quiet and nice and the loud, noisy cars were the men's cars. So there's a bit of a thing from way back then.
Oh, yeah, right.
Car today, so we're probably getting back to 100 years later.
Well, we're going full circle like we do for a lot of things. Yeah.
It's right in my house.
Do you have a picture of your car?
Yeah, right there.
Oh, it's gorgeous. And it's got a ribbon.
We come back in here, right through the kitchen here, we do have refreshments for you.
Oh, okay. That's amazing. So did you come to the talk just because you heard about this?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a Russell nut.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, and actually now the Automobile Museum in Oshawa knows about Russell cars because they had Yaroslav Petrushin speak at the end of 2024, and I think you can still go on their website and hear his talk. They've got a library of their old presentations. I think it was in November 2024. Yeah. Any other questions?
He's probably the farthest driving too. He's from a long ways away.
It's never long. It's a never long way to a friend's house.
There you go. Okay, well, that's it. Thank you very much for coming, and
Well, thank you very much for the talk. Really enjoyed it. Learned a lot.
good, thank you.
And, we have car shows here too.
A long time to do that thing.
Five times a year.
5 times a year, remember that, yeah.
The first car show this year is May 24th, and we do have posters for anyone that's interested in taking one tonight.
In the kitchen next to the coffee, as well as I think the ladies put it on the food too.
Okay, first car show, May 24th. Excellent. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you, Brooklyn.